let me ask you this question. I would like to ask the AG to propose legislation for what we call small claims court. There are lots of poor people, to an example you just gave, that they have issues with others and sometimes with large firms, but the lawyer fee is greater than the fee you're claiming.
It is their right. Unlike the right that someone has, all of our rights exist in context.
What's the context for second medical opinion?
Because you're disrespecting the process.
No.
Jesus, this is common sense, man.
Any situation which you seem to do, you're just dealing with Afro-Guyanese issues. If one, you can't bring and pull the leaders of the African community together, you're failing. And if two, you can't put forward a future, a blueprint, and a plan for African Guyanese, you're failing as well.
Pleasant Friday evening to you. This is the Freddie Kissoon Show. Wherever you are, good evening, good night, good morning, good afternoon. We are broadcasting from the studio of Pixel Incorporated, Pixel Guyana Incorporated, whose CEO is someone Guyana is familiar with. One of the best journalists Guyana has produced, and I make no apologies for that because I have known him for more than 25 years. We are in the studio of Leonard Gildarie, who worked with Kaito News for 20 years, worked with Stabroek News, helped to put Kaito Radio on the map, and was the co-founder of this show here. So he brings a lot of experience, and we're hoping after this evening, Gildarie will frequently join us in co-hosting these programs as he did for 1 full year. Gildarie, as I said before, is one of the journalists that has paid his dues. We are interviewing him this evening on, of course, where journalism is going, where newspapers are going in the context of the imminent closure of the Stabroek News. As you can see from the frame, my co-host is, as usual, Leonard Craig. So, without further ado, Leonard Gildarie. Leonard, before I say anything, let me put my foot in my mouth. You're gonna come, I know you're busy with Pixel Guyana Incorporated. You switch from journalism, successful businessman, that is to be welcome. People have to go to greener pastures, you have a family. But please consider sentimentally joining us again. Welcome to the program, and as you know, Leonard Craig. Let's start with the media landscape. What happened to Stabroek, in your opinion?
That's a very good question. Good evening, folks. It's been a little while. It's always a pleasure, but you know, like my hair is getting just like Freddie Kissoon. Good evening.
Your hair is getting mine now.
I'm losing some, but there's a lot of grays in it. I just noticed it, and I hoping the camera don't pick it up. But yes.
Let me send up waited after this program to buy a box of dye.
No, you're not using dye. Why would I want to do that? But yes, the Stabroek News scenario, and we would have seen the news of it early this week. It didn't come by the way. There was an announcement by the board, and it became quite a shock, I must tell you, because one would have thought that these things fixtures. The problem that you have is that those in the business would have known, and I said this publicly on my Facebook page, that the writing as far as print media is concerned, the writing was on the wall for a very long time, I think maybe 10-15 years back. And the reason for that is very simple. Anand Prasad is the editor-in-chief who would have said that market forces, and I saw that a long time back, that is very difficult to compete in such an environment, to have Stabroek News and any newspaper, in fact, that has a huge overhead from printing and bringing in print stuff into the country. It is always going to be a challenge, especially I'm on my phone the entire day, and I could draw some parallels here. I'm on my phone the entire day because I need to get stuff. If I want to Google something, it's there. You want the news, if you want to check cricket scores, it is there as long as you have the internet. So that writing was on the wall for a couple of years now. That's my thinking of it.
You know?
On the lighter side, before we continue, most of our viewers know you as the co-founder of this program, and then you disappeared, and then you are now replaced by another Leonard. And Freddie announced, your business and so on. But on the other side, how is your family and so on?
They're doing pretty good. My wife flew back this morning. She's back and forth out of the country. But Guyana.
The kids are big now.
Yeah, pretty tall. They're taller than I am. But the thing is, straddling two places, especially with family and work, this country is exciting. A lot of stuff happening, but you got to apply yourself. And maybe there's a topic for another time. How do we as a people, culturally and mentally, prepare ourselves to be ready for what Guyana, and it has been happening for a number of years now. But if you don't move pretty quickly, you're never going to get in a piece of the pie. I think a lot of people don't understand what is it that it takes to capitalize on the opportunities. I'm in business now, and I see many opportunities. A lot of people say, but I'm not getting an opportunity. Let me make it very, very clear, and I've said this before many times. This government never give me anything on, or never granted Pixels any concessions on a silver platter and say, hey, you take this, that we believe that you're a loyalist. I've never been a loyalist. I believe that this government has done a lot of good. Of course, could we improve? Yes, we can. But people need to stand up and take. But as a situation or a commentary for an entire different program, and we could talk about that an entire day.
Right. What the transition from journalism to business? What was the like and what was the motivation?
Well, look, at the end of the day, you got growing kids. The situation was a little selfish and realistic, if you want to put it that way. You got kids, they got to go to college, and I didn't see myself. To be honest, I think I would have outgrown. I'm always seeking new knowledge. How could I improve myself? I barely finished high school, I must tell you that. I don't have a degree to my name. A lot of people say, how do you do it? Where you got the knowledge from? You'll hang around people like Freddie and Glenn Lal and Prasad. And even if you look at what this government is doing, a lot of good examples, even from the opposition, you learn from everybody. And I believe that I wanted to do something, and there was no room for failure. And I didn't want to fail, so I had to do whatever it took to make sure that this company went from zero to where it is today. I can tell you I'm very happy, buoyed by a very good board of directors and an incredible team, young people that I took and I trained, and we learned, we fell long, we got our back, we dusted ourselves, fell long again, but we are here. Thank you, Lord. I must say that Pixels has become a household name because of our cameras and so on. And there's not a place in Guyana that people don't know the name of Pixels. And this is just in a mere 3.5 years. Could the rest of Guyana do it? I hope so. We're here. But to answer your question, Leno, it took a little while. The transition wasn't hard because the way I'm operating from, it's not much different from the media. It's just that one is more focused on advertising. But the media, I understand that world. That's where I came from.
You know, Leonard, your success story, apart from your business partners and your family, I would know about that evolution because we work closely together at Kaicho News. And when I see how successful you are, and the short space of time when you left Kaicho, for reasons we don't want to get into. But I remember I always remember, now I'm going to say it publicly, I always remember an incident when I think about you, Leonard Gildarie, and where you have come from. I looked over your shoulder and I saw your pay slip. You showed me your pay slip. And I'm telling you, I felt cold. Well, at that time, I was working at UG, so I got my income from UG. And when I remember that incident and where you are now, people should know how people evolve, where they come from, and what they've achieved. When I looking at you now in the studio, looking at your studio, I remember when Pixel first started. Because when it first started, you telling me about it, you telling me about the problem with GRA. Oh, I remember that. Oh God, I don't know how you didn't break down. Good, and I would hope as you move on, the competition is not unfair. This world moves by competition in all human realm. Professors have to compete and write books to outdo each other. The tennis player has to outdo his competitor, and business have to compete. But I just hope that the playing field is level, because I know in the beginning there were some breaking moments when you were at a disadvantage, and that should not have been. But I wanted to say that.
Yeah, well, thank you for that, Freddie. Look, perception, they say sometimes is reality, and let me make it very clear. You might look at success in one way that maybe the company is going as. So I look at success from the fact that we could make an impact on people's lives. About a week or two back, I had the opportunity to make a pitch for Pixels to some privates, to the Small Business Bureau, and they had some people who were taking grants and loans. So you make a pitch, because we have come out and say, look, these people don't have an opportunity in the world. One of the biggest things that businesses do in Guyana, and maybe a lot of places too, they build a big fancy building and they do put in all the furniture and all the nice things that comes along with it. But people don't see the need to advertise. So nobody knows what you're selling or what you have and could offer. And we are coming in now and says, Pixels, we're going to make it affordable for you. Every $100 that you spend on advertising, we're going to match it $100. That's our input into it. So I believe our success, when you talk about success is for me to see people buying into this model, buying into an idea that if you look across your neighbor and they're starving, but you have nice plates of food on your table. If you don't try to help the community, they're going to find a way of getting into your house. So I said, whatever you do as part of your companies or your business, impact on the environment or on the community, make sure you do a little project. And one of the projects that we came up with as Pixels was to put those cameras. And let me tell you, it cost us a lot of money. Yeah. And thousands of people logged into it, and nobody has heard of any other project like that in any part of the world that has an impact. And I'm pretty happy and pretty proud of it.
Game changer.
Yes, it has helped the way that people use the traffic, and ministers and diplomats and everybody using them. Do we have any money that we're making from it? No. So you talk about payslip. I think I might not agree with you there, because some places context is important. Could a company really afford to pay more? But then you look at business too, operating in an environment where some businesses are going to find shortcuts. One, they might not pay the taxes, so they have an advantage on you. They have more disposable income that way. They might not pay a lot of things on the wharves, and they might not find a way of evading taxes and so on, and containers. So if you're selling screens and they're selling screens, they have a way of doing it. But the reality is that the playing field is never going to be easy. How do you get that advantage? Is by creating a team, maybe of workers, young people who understand the value and maybe work very, very hard with yourself. You motivate them, you encourage them, you make their lives better. And as a company grows, they grow. You can't take away everything, take all the profits and say you're going to pocket it. I don't get a salary from this Pixels, I can tell you that. It's, the company grows, we grow as well. We invest in all the time. But I'm happy with what we're doing.
All right, journalism. That's what.
Yeah.
That's what you started
right,
out
right.
in, and that's what we're gonna
Back
talk
to
about. Your experience in journalism.
back to the question we started with. You said you saw the writing on the wall with respect to print media. Why would you say Stabroek News is the first casualty? What is in the air that may have affected Stabroek News that has not yet reached the culture, and will come after that, to them after that?
That's an interesting question. So the context, in my view, would be, if you look at who are the owners for Stabroek News, I rather suspect it's not just the Gildaries, they were other players as well. If you have dwindling income revenues, and the majority of your revenues are going to come from advertising, it's not going to be from the sale, I could tell you that. That sale, I happen to know institutional knowledge that the sales numbers would have been dropping over the last decade or so drastically. I can remember, I think Culture News had about 30-something thousand on a Sunday, and maybe about 20,000 during weekdays. You could ask now, maybe that's gone down to quarter, because the fact is everybody is looking at the phones. Now, you asked the question directly. The owners of Stabroek might be different from the owners of Culture News. Culture News is just maybe Glenn Lyle and whoever, very, very limited. At Stabroek is going to be different. So if they got to take a business decision, things are hard. I'm not going to go into my pocket to be rescuing this company. The company has also claimed in the past that it's owned by government. I saw that. But the editor-in-chief in his recent interview says, look, it might not necessarily be that because the government owes us that this played a role. It's market forces. And I think that was very telling. When I say the writing on the wall, I saw that, because if you have dwindling, the pool of advertisers in Guyana, it remains this. So if you go into the same pool and then you have influencers on one hand, online websites and wherever it is, all them going to the small pool, you're going to have a problem eventually. And if the government decided to spread their limited budget that they have across the different areas, you're going to have a problem. If the costs of raw materials like print materials, machinery parts and electricity goes up and things like that, you're going to have a problem. So what compounds that issue there as well is if you're not getting the caliber of reporters. Back in the days, you know, it was a good thing to be a good reporter, a chief reporter at Stabroek News or Culture News. Now, you'd be lucky if you were able to attract them, because how much could you pay them? That's one. And then if you don't have a love for it, and you know, we have a problem with labor in Guyana, you're just not finding people. So there's a lot of complexities, there's a lot of difficulties and challenges being faced. But I think the Stabroek News situation, that was purely a business decision. I saw some people saying that they would probably retain an online business. I'm not sure I saw that anywhere coming out from Stabroek. I think that is a detour from them, because I'm not sure how they're going to recover. I did enjoy the letters to the editor column. I did enjoy reading a couple of their stuff. It was interesting. It provoked thoughts as to whether there's enough to remain in business, because of business decision at the end of the day. It is going to be different. So let's answer a question now. Culture News. Glenn probably has deep pocket, but there's only so much deep pocket would go for, because it might be a source of pride for him to not see Culture News shuttered after a little while. I don't think he's going to probably allow it, but after a little while too, the thought is always going to be the back of his head. How much do I want to dig into my pocket to continue to allow Culture News to exist? I think the answer, if you were to ask me, the answer will have to be finding a different model. And that is, you could ask me the question, what is the answer? And I would say, you have to diversify. If you have a business and you're losing your market here, you better find some way very quickly of getting revenues from other area, and those revenues would have to be where it means online. Find a way of getting government to shift their ads for it to go online. The government is going to think, well, not a lot of people who don't have internet, how are they going to read the ads for vacancies or contracts and so on?
Incidentally, the vice president last November made a statement concerning that. He said the government will, with these ads for contracts, procurement, the government will create one website and have the procurement notices there so you can visit them over and over. And what the vice president said at one of his press conferences is that if you put it in a newspaper and somebody flipped the page and the newspaper the next day it is gone, and the government cannot sustain putting an ad in the newspaper every day for people to see it. And he is saying that doing that will save the government a lot of money. And secondly, he hinted, but he didn't explain it, but he hinted that there are other figure he's talking about social media. These other platforms that got so much viewership that you can see the analytics and so on. And maybe government need to start considering distributing their money along that line. And going along with what you just said, if you have a newspaper and you diversify into providing that same sort of platform where if I give you a procurement notice in Kaichur or whomever, it's also providing the same explanation. And so
look, I understand where you're coming from with that. So there's two school of thoughts for me. We just saw Trinidad. A major newspaper got shuttered there.
Newsday.
Yes, Newsday. And you look across the world, what is happening to newspapers all the time. They're merging, they're trying to survive, and we see the Jeff Bezos and all of them.
Post, yeah.
All these big players have to get into the thing. I think it's Murdoch is involved with the Fox News and so on. If you don't diversify, margin, whatever it is, you can't because you're not getting it. The reality is, the question that is always going to be for government, and I think if you're really into newspaper business, while the backbone is to get money from advertisers for you to sustain, because it's a business decision at the end of the day, whether you keep, it's always going to be how could you remain if you don't, if government withholds money for you or don't give you ads, could you remain a reputable newspaper that is very focused on getting the truth out there and remain balanced? I don't know. I think it's going to be difficult for somebody to argue to an editor or the owner of a newspaper or any media house that you can't remain focused because you didn't get no ads from the government. I think it's a good thing to address your point there, that maybe we need, if you're going to have media houses, that they got to find a way of raising money, not from government, but from the thing. The reality is the government has the money, so why not tap into that? But if the government gives you the money, could the argument be made to that they could dictate what you have as in your editorial? But it is always going to be that argument that's going to be out there. But for me, I think the whole world has changed as far as print media is concerned. That's gone, that's dead. A lot of people are going to get upset with me. But the reality is you can't. The advertising world are strong. And they're going elsewhere. They're going to find influencers. They're going to find online website. They come in towards our billboards. They come in different ways because those platforms are being seen easily by people.
Leonard, I trained as a person trained in very, very precious, priceless disciplines: history, philosophy, international relations, political theory. I find it difficult to accept opposition parties, civil society groups, and newspapers going out of existence. I think the very foundation of freedom or diversity of thought, of philosophical arguments, of differences in approach to life, rest on those things. Independent media, civil society, opposition parties, and it's almost commonsensical. A minister, relative, do something to you, that government is going to cover it up. But you have an opposition party that is going into parliament and say, charge him, so you know what happens. So those things are priceless. But I thought, and I thinking that the stabroek news, I'm not going to talk about the cultural news because you rightfully put it. There's different ownership, so therefore somebody like Dr. Bobby Ramloo, who owns Guyana Times and Glendale, could, because of their other business interests, could siphon off and keep their paper going. But it's different with the stabroek news. But so let's talk about the stabroek news. I read the statement by Brendan de Caries, in which he said, yes, government ad was important to the newspaper. And then you have Sherwood Duncan on a Facebook post blaming the government, lack of advertising money, and Takuma Ogunse, African rights activist, blaming the government. But let us look at human nature. If you look at the stabroek news over the past 5-10 years, you predicating your existence on government ads. And there has to be a kind of give and take. The government make mistake, you plaster it front page, and nobody can tell you you're wrong. They made a mistake, they did stupidness. But then when a government excel in some area, you also give it credit. And I thought the stabroek news wasn't aware of that kind of commonsensical approach. And so the paper, you go about Guyana as you do, as Leonard Craig do. You go in the market, you go around the gas station, the supermarket, and people will tell you, but I heard this, Gildarie, several times. Not is irrelevant. The PNC is irrelevant. You know the only body who keeping this government and its toes is stabroek news. This is the real opposition, man. And at the foreign level, they saw the stabroek news as an opposition mantle. And I thought that, wouldn't you think that that was one of the crucial mistakes they made? Let us be fair to human nature. You run a government, you pick up the newspapers every day that you give $80–90 million a year to. And you see in some very, very vicious, condemnation, and it's a pattern. Don't you think you're bound to run into trouble there?
Well, that was one, I did see that argument somewhere along the line. Here was the thing. I was in the newspaper business 15–20 years. You're always going to find, if you're a good newspaper, and I think we would have seen people who respected talk about what's the role of the fourth estate. And if you are in bed with the government and you always singing praises for them, are you doing your job? So you're always going to find yourself at a critical juncture. What role do you really play? And I think stabroek news, I saw the argument also in the early 90s and so on, when they started rising, that they fought against Burnham. They fought against different places. I remember Kaicho News. One time is the PNC, one time is the PPP. Everybody was getting it. It depends. There's another scenario, another context to this entire situation. Sitting at Kaicho News, I remember there were, there were different reporters, and different reporters had different leanings or were sympathetic towards a political party. And so you'd have the different write-ins. So here it is that you face at the editor, the end of the day, editorial meeting. What do you have, Leonard Craig? What do you have, Freddie Kissoon? You face the very difficult task of throwing out everything out of the newspaper because you're leaning one way or the other way. So eventually, whatever is put to the table is either you have content or not, because if you keep throwing out, you eventually have no newspaper. So let's say you have half of them is leaning one way. The newspaper by default ends up leaning a particular way. The editor might have a particular way, but he is forced to go where he can decide where he's going to put his main headlines. But at the end of the day, the majority of the newsroom is PNC or PPP. Where's the newspaper leaning? And that is a problem that everybody can say Anand Prasad or Glenn Lal in a particular way. But Glenn Lal, he's very forceful. But Anand Prasad, in this particular case, was he overly critical of the PPP? Did he do it deliberately? I don't know. What I do know is that there was a lot of criticism by the government people of where that newspaper was leaning. And if the critical part of it, was Christopher Ram still part of the columnist?
Yeah, up to
right.
today.
So then you had, from time to time, I read Ralph Ramkaran as well. And Ralph,
But he's not a columnist.
Yeah,
Starbuck borrows his blog.
Right.
That's
But if you look at some of his writings would be almost on the edge here, and then he leaves away. So you have those little things, but Stabroek, I think, was caught in a very unfortunate position where Anand was not a business decision thing. There was a board of directors, and based on my knowledge, he was basically editorial. But of course, the editorial policy would be dictated somewhat by the board and say, hey, you're going a little too hard. I don't know the internal workings or the politics of Stabroek, whether Anand, I happen to know that he was a very strong fellow in terms of standing up for his views. Anand Benjamin was a little more quiet. But Anand Prasad, as the editor-in-chief, was very forceful how he wants it. Did the board have any bearings? Because I think when you look at what he says as against what the board said, there seemed to be a little contradiction here. The government pulled in ads from this, what Brendan Nikeri said, and then Anand Prasad says, the market forces played a role. There seemed to be a little contradiction there. But at the end of the day, did Anand deliberately allowed a particular leaning of that newspaper, or did the reporters, by the very bias? It is always going to be a question, and I always wondered in my head whether he had lost control, whether the editorial, because you and I know that Glenn Lal sitting in the newspaper as the editor-in-chief, he can't control what the reporters think, or if they have a friend who is a minister or maybe an opposition leader. How do you control it right? There's a natural bias that's there. There's a natural bias.
To me, though, it doesn't seem as though Stabroek had a balance or competing. There were some reporters that you can look at. I don't want to call names, but some reporters, you read their stuff would be balanced, and I have two reporters in mind. And the other seem to be sensationalist against the government, and sometimes you wonder, it's a simple matter: present this side, or if you present this side and you call this person and they gave you a statement without even calling or talking to anybody in the government, you make these, and then somebody in the government got to come and give a correction and provide some facts, and then you still...
All right. I know exactly what you're saying there, Leno. And
yes.
Freddie, let me address this. You have the social media out there that you're competing against. Whether you like it or not, print media is competing against social media.
Yeah.
If you bring out an editorial, or let's say that you are having a very balance of all two sides there, and it's not sexy enough, nobody's reading it. That is it at the end of the day. I think in some ways, clickbaiting, if you look at some sexy headlines, and when you really look at the article, you said, what the hell, this doesn't reflect what the headline is saying. But at the end of the day, I think there is probably an automatic that bias there to look. The news of the day would have to be sensational. and let us wherever it goes, whether it falls on the government side. If it falls all the time on the government side, well then you could make an argument that the editor of the day, who's always going to be in charge.
That's my suspicion. That's what I'm saying.
He's going to take the blame, or she's going to take the blame for allowing that to slip in, because you could very well argue the buck stops at you, because you should have seen that this newspaper is overly critical of the government of the day, because all times government of the day comes under the spotlight. So is there nothing, I think what Freddie said there, is there nothing at all that this government has done? Is there nothing at all that Barjagdi or Irfan Ali, President and Vice President, would have done for this country, or even the ministers, that is good? I could tell you, if you were to ask me if there's anything good, there's a lot good. Could we improve? Absolutely. Could we tighten our system? Absolutely. But there got to be something that's good too, that this government has done. So where do you draw the line? How do you hold the balance? And that is the question that is there.
My job is to do the research and then come to people like you and ask the questions. I write a daily column, which would run into dozens of thousands in my career. And so I have to do the research. And I have done the research since August 2000. I saw Kian Jabur. You know who's Kian Jabur, we all know who's Kian Jabur, said, this is what he said, sitting down alongside Timothy Jonas. They were in Anno then. He said, I have never seen anything in newsroom, anything that is newsroom that is critical of the government. And I think he's right. I have not seen anything that is critical of the government by Guyana Times. I have not seen anything that is critical of a paper I write for, the Chronicle. But you cannot, as an independent paper, quote unquote, then say to yourself, they got Chronicle, they got the Guyana Times, right? Why we must carry anything in favor of them? And I thought subtly that crept in to the Stabroek News. And therefore, you didn't find from August 2020 any editorial that saw something, whether it's a botanic garden, whether it's a rice field, whether it's a foreign policy, you saw nothing in which an editorial put that in a positive way. The other thing is, the Stabroek News has a weekly column called In the Diaspora. And the headmaster, the masthead, said clearly, news about Guyana that the diaspora is interested in. For 10 years, In the Diaspora has not run a column that is favorable to the government. And all its columnists are either anti-government or say something against the government. There has been no column and no editorial in the Stabroek News about the Commission of Inquiry into the election. There's been not a column commented on the 2020, nothing. I think somewhere along the line, Leonard, the Stabroek News may have lost their perspective.
Again, context is important. I believe what you're saying there has hit the nail on the head. The problem that you have, how many columnists you know in Guyana, Freddie? I'm going to ask you this.
Well, you mean no personal reading?
Or have the ability to write a column or sustain a column. You've probably been one of the longest, if not the longest. I don't know of anybody that you could call outside the flock or the current herd that we have here, that you could say, I think he can write a good column and sustain it for the next 5 years. The reality is that we have lost a lot of institutional knowledge. The ones who haven't died are retired, or they're just clearly not in touch with the reality of the day. But
and a good journalist, you've gone over into business. Anyway.
Yeah, but here's the reality of it. You're stuck at Kaito News or at Stabroek News with one man or two men who's writing something and there's nobody else to get. It's either people got good ideas, but putting it on paper and finding the words To get it done, it's a different ballgame altogether. But you're right. After a while, if you do your research and you look at it, because you're stuck with one man who has one idea, writing this column all the time, he is going to stuck in a mode there that there's no fresh ideas. I remember writing, what was it, 1,000 and New for Kaiser News for 100 episodes or 100 columns over the week. I counted, and I didn't know that you could write 1,000 and write 100 columns, because it evolved eventually about life in Guyana and become a column. But after a little while, I found myself in a rut, because what else could you say? I don't know if Freddie does it. I think you must be running mad by now.
I am.
No, sometimes Freddie repeats himself.
Yeah, he does. He
and
does.
just adds
But
something.
yeah, but it is a problem that all newspapers or newscasts are gonna think. If you have somebody who's contributing an editorial or whatever it is that they're contributing, and if you're using one person all the time, the idea is gonna be one way. You're gonna see a pattern there that's emerging, and I think that is what happened to Stabroek. All in all, if you're going to put that in a couple of paragraphs, the advertising, the fact that you're running out of ideas, you don't get proper reporters, and you're stuck with whatever you have, it is going to be the writing on the wall. And that is my thing on that. And had there been other newspaper in Guyana, I think that would have been the end result of it. It's just that the way it happened, while I saw it happening, I thought it would have happened in a more subtle way. It kind of shocked me, to be honest. It shocked me.
But let's say somebody pulls something out of the bag and say, okay, we're going to keep it for a couple of years. It cannot be the same format that it's in right now. It cannot be. For example, you cannot have Christopher Ram doing a column almost 3 days or 4 days a week. We did it, you know, at Kaicho News. Freddie Kissoon put a lash from Pipentam, and Pipentam put a lash from Freddie Kissoon, and people buy the paper the next day to see the two of us quarreling, right? And I think you need that kind of generation of tit for tat, of different perspective, of different debaters going after each other. And I was wondering why the Stabroek News couldn't see that could help sell. That could help
But Freddie, I'm
interest.
just telling you, you ain't finding them. You tell me where you could find them.
No, you have people that they could have. I see this. I see an answer to Christopher Ram, Joel Bagwandin.
Yeah.
Joel Bagwandin would write something and show you the angles of this investment that Christopher Ram missed. He did a very good analysis where Christopher Ram misinterpret a financial report from, I think, the IDB or what have you. So you have this thing. Now, for example, you got the Guyana Human Rights Association, which is very dominant. And then every week you feature a press release by the Guyana Human Rights Association critical of the government. Then carry something by Garou, carry something by a pro-PPP NGO. But when you continue to saturate the paper with Guyana Human Rights, Christopher Ram, you know, you end up with people saying, and don't forget, it's not a state-owned media. When people say, man, it's a government media. People saw it as an independent private daily. So the expectation was, it shouldn't be, you know, an opposition paper. And I think
I agree. Well, what you're talking about there is the model of the newspaper, and you're talking about diversity. And let me stick a pin here. If you were to ask the normal Joe in the street and says, which one of the newspapers leaning to which one of the parties, or which one of the media houses leaning to which party, I'm sure they're going to get it right 90% of the times. They say, oh, newsroom, so. Guyana Times, so. Kaicho News, so. They're going to tell you. But it comes back, I would, what you're talking about there in terms of diversity, about having a tit for tat and so on, which is good for reading. It is going to be in a very perfect scenario, the perfect storm or whatever you want to call it. The thing is, you're not going to find them very easily. People now reading. Hey, Freddie, I get worried all the time. I can't remember the last time I see somebody pick up a book and read. I can't remember the last time. Do they read online? Do they get Kindle and maybe read a book? I do that. I do that from time to time. But you're not seeing it, and that in itself, we're gonna have some severe deficit in terms of when you're gonna have intellectual gaps or whatever you want to call it, with the younger guys who stop coming out because they either have. You're gonna talk to a lot of people with degrees. They got degrees, right? And when you listen to what they are really talking about, nothing coming out of the mouth that is of substance. And it is not that you want to criticize, but the reality is, as a country, we have to deal with that capacity issue, or the lack of.
The art of reading, like picking up a book and reading, to me that's dying, because now, even on your smartphone, you don't even have to read. You got screen readers. So you could just put on your phone, tell your phone to read what is there, and just listen to it.
Yeah, the audibles.
Right? So this thing you used to enjoy, being by yourself and just reading, is you're in the kitchen now and you're listening to something. You know.
But you know, I've been with culture for 29 years, and across my analytical perspective in Guyanese society, people from the mulatto Creole class and people from the upper middle class and middle class tend to be very flippant or negative in the interpretation of Glenn. But we who know him knew that despite the lack of in-depth education or what have you, he had his hand on the pulse of what is needed in Guyana.
Yeah.
And he has not stopped that up to now. For example, I'll give an example to show you where cultural news has just lost its way. This country has a Muslim president, a Muslim agriculture minister, a very active historic Muslim organization, CIOG. It has a sizable Muslim population, and then it has an anti-imperialist heritage based on Burnham, Jagan, and the anti-colonial thing. Do you know Glenn Lamb, in the cultural news, has covered the genocide in Gaza, covered the marches, covered the symposium, and covered in his front page what Israel does in Gaza? Though I don't think Guyanese people want to know what's happening to those Muslims in Gaza. And he has carried 6 front page story lifted from foreign news thing about what Israel has done in Gaza. Do you know, Leonard, I've done the research. Do you know in the foreign page section of the stabroek News, something in Malaysia, something in Myanmar, they have never carried a story about Israeli violence in Gaza, and they have never covered a local issue.
So let me.
You see, that is where Glenn comes in. He knows what Guyanese want.
So let me tell you, that's an interesting observation. I was at the newspaper and I know how it works. You got to understand the thing. Ultimately, the buck stops at the editor-in-chief or the publisher of the newspaper. You go to the newspaper and you want to know who pulling on the news. And if you see who pulling on the news, sometimes it's a graphic artist, or maybe it's a reader. It's not necessarily the editor-in-chief. You probably never see that. And maybe there's where to fail. Because if you as the publisher don't know what's going into your newspaper the next day, then whatever happens after that, the buck stops with you. You got to take the hit for it. So, to answer your question, you might want to know why Stabroek News ever do that. Maybe could it be a scenario that the editor-in-chief didn't even pay attention, but surely one day passed, 2 days passed, and you're looking at your newspaper. As an editor, you read the front to back. What did I have in this newspaper today? You want to know next day after it's printed, because you see it to bed. It's going to go to print in a digital format, and after it comes out in the printed version. Next day, you pick it up as an editor, and you make sure that you go through it to see what you would have done. You worked, you toiled the entire day. But in many cases, and this is where the newspapers fail in the system. If you put in a newspaper to bed, you better make sure as much as possible that you know what are the contents, because if anything hits, whether it's a lawsuit or anything, you must be aware of it. What are the headlines, and was it anything that libelous or anything? You must know. And so some of those things, yeah, we to blame if they continuously did that just by putting something frivolous or that is not connecting to the people of Guyana, because those news story, I remember I used to pull up those stories through those foreign stories, and we had I looked for some of the news as offbeat that may not necessarily have anything to do with the normal hardcore news, but if you see a woman with $93 million and thing, we could put that as a side thing, so it all depends on you. But that'll be subjective. Glenn might say that how is that relevant to the newspaper? So you have it at Stabroek News, they do that. I think it's just after a little while, we coming back, we trying to determine, we're doing a postmortem here. What did they do wrong? Did they get the news wrong? Did they just fell out of touch with their advertising? Did they do enough to attract advertising dollars? We here are in the branding business, advertising, and if you don't keep your clients connected and in tune with them, you consult with them, see what are the problems, you don't work with them. That's a different dispensation where you sit down in an advertising department hoping that ads comes in. We're taking an actual different way. Did Stabroek News do that? So there's the entire situation, Freddie and Leno, is very, very complex, but the writing is on the wall because the advertising pie is dropped. It's no longer financially sustainable for you to continue running this newspaper. The biggest cost is going to be electricity, print materials, the machines when they break down, it's not going to be lovely, it's going to be expensive. So these are writing on the walls, right there on them.
So if they decide, somebody decides, some group, foreign or local, decide, well, we will keep it going, there has to be a transformation of depth.
So what Leonard is saying, even if you have this group, you can correct me, that comes and try to sustain Stabroek News and change the format, the writing that was on the wall may just fade a little, but it will get bright again.
So what's going to happen?
That's an interesting.
The Guyana Times and
it is an interesting conversation, but here is a problem that you also face. You have a very limited, or the pie, the advertising pie is like this. The readership, you got to look who reading nowadays or who following who. Gordon Mosley has his following. You have the other influencer or online media personality, they give a little news. Demar Waves, whoever it is, Newsroom has the fortunate position of having a website, maybe the Facebook part of it, the website as well, and then they also have the newscast, which is caught. It is carried on all the channels that they have if you have cable, so that gives them an advantage. Now, if you coming back and just merely online, what is the advantage that you have there really? What are you bringing to the table?
No, well, Freddie is not saying just come back online. Somebody come in and say, give me Stabroek News to run, and we're going to change up some things and make Stabroek News.
It is going to be difficult from a financial perspective. The minute that you say that the newspaper is there, it's closing because of not advertising dollar. Unless the man got a lot of money to really plunge into it, I don't see that thing there put a nail in the coffin there. Had you say, look, we can no longer sustain it and we're going to go, I think it's dead right there, because anybody that's coming in now, they're going to say, all right, how am I going to make back my money, or how much do I have to sink in to keep it alive? There's always going to be a finite amount that a person say, okay, I'm going to go beyond 15 million or whatever the case. I don't see that happening, to be honest.
Which means therefore that Bobby Ramroop and Glenn Lal that are pouring money from the other businesses to subsidize Guyana Times and Kaicho News, we may not see that.
No, maybe they're not pouring money, but maybe they're just breaking even.
I think, look,
Which is evil.
Yeah.
You know what is a printed press to sustain? Anyway,
Here's the thing. So they get
let me break down now.
I'm not sure how much money Stabroek, so we could break it down and look at what they're making, right? I think maybe it was 70% of the newspaper revenues is going to be coming from advertising. Now the school of thought would say, if you reduce the amount of paper that you print, then you're going to make it. But when you start printing the newspaper in the night, there's going to be over 500 to 1,000 that's spoiled because the colors fix themselves after about 1,000 is printed. And then you get the newspaper that you could say, okay, I could sell this. Do you reduce the number of papers and hope that they break even? That's a possibility, but then you stand to impact those people who are subscribing or who you're selling to. So I don't know whether you turn it or twist it, because against that background, if the government is diversifying to how they spend their advertising dollars, or whether they're going to sink money into continue to advertise for those contracts and so, because that's a big part of what the newspaper makes in terms of the revenues. If you take that away, then it's dead. The newspaper's dead.
Okay, so let me enter into the realm of politics a little. And using what Freddie said earlier about the one-dimension way in which Stabroek News operated, don't you think that if you have a paper covering anti-government material more than anything else, that a lot of the people out there who need to read may dismiss it? So you're talking about printing a smaller amount. If you had a more, I won't want to say pro-government, but more balanced, a little bit of good, little bit of bad about everything the government do.
People with different perspectives.
People, and so you might have more readers actually. So the reduction of the print might not necessarily have to come into play.
It is, yeah, you could turn it and twist it, whether you print more or whatever it is, if you don't have the balance rules. But balance is always going to be subjective too. Balance for who? Is it for the government? Who decides what is balance or not?
The readers.
Yeah. The readers at the end of the day. So there's a lot of people talking about corruption that is happening here. The government says we have systems in place to address if there are complaints about corruption. The opposition believes that they should have more of everything because that's what they do. They push for that. If you don't do enough news that congratulates the government, that give them kudos, the opposition comes out and say, balance. So it's always a matter of perception. But yes, as a fourth estate, you have to draw the line somewhere as to what do you do, and you're always going to face of not getting people to advertise it too because they are sympathetic towards the government or some other way. And you talk about something, they remember about 15 years ago what Stabroek News wrote about them or about something that they did to the family. It is a very small world, and these are the realities that we deal with in the media. And I could tell you so many other stories of how business people think. We deal with them from time to time, and they're going to give you 101 reasons why they're not advertising with you, because something the grandfather you did the grandfather 20 years back. That's the reality.
But what about the question of fear, whether it's justified or not? But if you have a burgeoning economy like Guyana, I mean, you just look around this place and you can't count the amount of companies that have come into Guyana. Every day in the paper somebody open up something, some foreign investor. Do you think they may not feel comfortable in giving millions of dollars every quarterly or every 6 months in advertising to a paper, and when they open it, lash on the government, lash on the president, some of it derogatory. So don't you think without the element of fear, they may say, nah man, I better, I don't know what the government may think. When they see these full-page ads by us every day, they may think we keeping this newspaper going, but body I better pull. Don't you think that
your ad is directly underneath the story that embarrasses the government the most? You know?
It is, and those are questions that are always going to be the editor. The editor, if he is worth his salt, and he doesn't think about the profit of the newspaper, which is definitely going to be in contradiction to what the board thinks. The board is thinking about money at the end of the day. So if he is worth his salt and he decides to take on the establishment, because that's his job, that's a fourth estate job, he's not going to think where the ads are going to be, very sympathetic to that ad above.
Yeah, understand.
And I don't know.
No, I was thinking from the perspective of the advertiser, not the.
But I think the government too, because whether you like it or not, the playing field is shifted. There are more players right now on the ground, and if the government has taken a decision, look, let us start sharing this advertising dollars to others. It's a business decision. Are there going to be fallouts from that? Well, here's a problem if you're going to use that argument. If you have competition coming in, competition is good, it brings out the best in us. So if you're not afraid of competition, if you have competition, what do? You just sit down and sit in your hands and say, let's continue our merry way, the same way we were operating 5-10 years back. Let us now change our approach, and that is what we're discussing. Is the online thing going to work for Stabroek? Could they maintain that and keep that alive and keep it that way? I am not sure legally. If you're winding up Stabroek News as it is, could you come back and go online using Stabroek News? There may be some legal issues here. I'm not sure how that works. Maybe.
We got to go without putting signal. Your predictions. Look, anybody who going home now this Friday evening from work and going in the kitchen to cook, it's either their phone in the air listening to music, or either they put in a flash drive, but they will no longer put in a record player. Because after 5 songs, they got to come to the kitchen to CDs player not being made anymore. Are we not talking about the demise of newspaper in the next 10 years? And newspapers now being replaced by the phone. We got to go, so how long more you give Guyana Times and Culture News? Are we closing that?
I know the window of opportunity to diversify, it is closing very, very rapidly. The internet is expanding across the country. The news is at the fingertips on your cell phones. You talk about the record players and the radiograms and so on. You can easily take your phone here and you do Bluetooth onto a speaker and you listen to your music 1 hour straight without having to do anything. So I would answer your question this way. The door is slamming shut very, very quickly. There's a new, the situation has changed, and if companies want to continue to exist, they have got to adapt to the changes that are here, and the changes are happening rapidly, and the field keeps shifting all the time.
All right, as you have a studio now, we're quite happy to come and do a program for you and make sure the studio gets advertisement. Leonard, my friend, it's always nice talking to you. Please come and do some co-hosting with us.
Yeah.
Thanks for being with us this Friday evening. We were broadcasting from the studio of Pixel Guyana Inc., which is the CEO, I want to say, which is owned, but Gildarie would say no, he's not the owner, which is the CEO of Guyana, Pixel Guyana Incorporated Inc. is Leonard Gildarie, a name in journalism that certainly wouldn't go away because he has done yeoman service in professional journalism. Whatever is left of Friday evening, please enjoy it. Please enjoy the weekend coming up in Mashimani, and we will have a program on Mashimani evening for you. On behalf of Leonard Gildarie, our guest, and our co-host,